happening, especially in the Americas, and the recent attack or kidnapping, or we're still trying to find a word for it, what happened when the US attacked and took away a president of a country and the first lady, and is now trying the same president in the US. Many people have expressed concern because it is unprecedented and no one knows what happens next. African leaders are afraid. African citizens, some are celebrating, just like some celebrated in Venezuela when their leader was taken. I'd want to have your take on this, Wakili Kinyanjui, because this definitely shifts a lot. It's there on the front page of the Standard, the Star newspaper today, how it happened, how bodyguards of this president betrayed their president, Nicolas Maduro, and allowed his capture and subsequent arraignment in New York. This has not happened, at least not in recent history. And what does this mean for global politics?
Well, thank you very much. Unfortunately, what we are seeing now is a US hegemony. It's the revival of the colonial mentality through these rogue terrorists called Donald Trump. He may not like that expression, but that it really, I mean, when they did that to Noriega, and he happened to suffer the same fate. Look at the sort of situation that led to his ultimate death in 2017. He is then released from a US prison, and then he is taken immediately to trial in France, and then he's taken back to Panama, and then he dies in a prison. They needed to send a message that you don't mess with us. But let's go back in the month of November last year. Last year, Trump came up with the security strategy of the US, in which he revived what he called the Monroe Doctrine. The Monroe Doctrine was that you, as a European in the Western sphere, could not interfere with us, the US, and we should interfere with you, but we will defend ourselves at the point of aggression. Now, there is no doubt that there was no aggression in terms of Venezuela attacking the US. But the US, totally unprovoked, then begins marshaling all its military. And this went back about 5 months ago. I mean, it didn't happen just last week. Excuse me. So you can see that there was a concerted goal and effort by Trump to at least take over Venezuela. And before I fully answer that question, let me go back a little bit to Hugo Chavez, the person that Maduro took over from. Hugo Chavez experienced almost the very same thing when the CIA then had this coup that failed. And who took over from Hugo Chavez? It was his deputy. But all this was stage managed, but Hugo Chavez was being forced to resign. And then in the palace, he refused to resign. He refused to sign that document. The military then took him to a secret place. And then his removal, as it were, just like Maduro's, then accosted the United States and the CIA specifically with the legality of the scenario, which is why Secretary Rubio couldn't answer the question when he was asked, how legal is this that you are kidnapping a president of a foreign country with his wife, and then you are having all these allegations against him, and you want to try him within the New York jurisdiction? And the question will be, and he was taken to court yesterday, do you have jurisdiction even to do that? Don't we have the Vienna Convention on the immunity of heads of state? Why would you do this sort of a thing? But let's go back to answer that question to the petrodollars. Let's remember that Venezuela is sitting on about 303 billion barrels of oil, projected, and it will be the largest oil producer if it did happen. And when now Trump then came and held a press conference and said that we lost oil. When allegedly Hugo Chavez, then after assuming power, after his vice president then was, removed again, And he was reinstated, say that, look, we have to nationalize our resources. So all this is about oil. It has nothing to do with the President Maduro's alleged crimes, because if he was drug trafficking, allegedly, why would Juan Hernandez, the former president of Honduras, is shipped to the US, face the same, almost near exactly the same charges, and then somehow he is pardoned by the same Trump for the same offense. So you cannot have this high moral ground and tell me that, we want to punish crime as against the United States. Okay. This is the expansionist state that Trump has taken off the US in order to steal oil in Venezuela. They did this with Iraq, they did this with Gaddafi, and when Gaddafi said, for instance, that pay me with gold. I don't want your pieces of paper that you go back to Washington, D.C. and you paint green and you come and tell me that I'm paying you for the oil that you take from us, which then led to his death because NATO, then killed him. Let me end with this, that we're going to see more and more of these hegemonic, these expansionist, these colonial, neo-colonial acts of the United States because Venezuela was selling a lot of its oil to China, and it had gotten off the platform of paying using petrodollars. And so this was a direct challenge to the United States dollar. And Trump, being who he was, and he had promised the oligarchs in the oil industry, especially from Texas, during his re-election, that he was going to do something about this that happened to them during Hugo Chavez's time in Venezuela. He has to pay back. And this is what is happening in Latin America. And it's going to happen more, and it is about oil and mineral resources.
Yet issues around oil and other interests have always been there. And in the case of Iraq and even Libya that Wakili Kinyanjui mentioned, yes, even though there was US involvement, it was not that direct in the demise or exit of those leaders. It was always left, especially towards the end, to local forces and interests. In Iraq, Saddam Hussein was tried by local Iraqis and local courts. How different is it this time round? And are the fears being expressed globally valid?
Thank you, Fred. Allow me to just also take you back, like you've mentioned. Some of these things have been seen before. And the question people are asking, including myself, is how different is this one, just like you've put it. But I would say this, if you hold a gun and I hold a gun, it is easy to talk about the law. If you hold a knife and I hold a knife, it is easy to talk about rules. If I come barehanded and you come barehanded, it is easy to talk about something like reason. But if you come with a gun and I come with a knife, the law is in your hand. You are the one reasoning. Everything is on your hand. And I think this is what America have realized, that because of their military power and things like that, and including their currency, they are like coming with a gun on one hand and coming with a knife on the other hand, and the other country is coming with bare hand. And you want people to talk about the law, you want people to talk about rules, you want people to talk about reason. There is never going to be any. And history has told us there wasn't any, because this is what America has used. Now, coming to their issue, like he has mentioned, we are talking about drugs. Up to this moment, from the data and everything that I have read, I still believe, I may be wrong, but I still believe that a country, if America is suffering from drugs, there are more drugs from Mexico and Colombia into America than Venezuela. I think that Venezuela would just be one of them, but Colombia and Mexico probably has more drugs getting into the US and why have their presidents not been kidnapped? But even if the president was to be kidnapped, I would still ask why the wife? Is the wife also part of the presidency? Like, is the wife also ruling alongside? Are they co-presidents? Because I don't understand why you would want to capture the president and also capture the wife. So at this moment, the question would be, where it has happened before, have we seen the positive differences that we can say Libya is now better off than when Gaddafi was president? Do we now want to say any other place they have done this before, that country has improved in their political space, economic or otherwise? Maybe the data shows the downside. And so this is why the world is getting worried. Even today, if assuming that Kenyans are really, really tired with President William Ruto, would they accept that a big brother like the US comes, picks William Ruto and goes? Even Kinyanjui here, who is not supporting William Ruto, would tell you no. Because that will mean if Meshach is picked and placed there, you are now fully their puppet, because what they did to the other one, they will do to you. What they did to the other nation, they will do to your nation going forward, and it will go and go and go forever. But what does this tell about now the League of Nations like the UN? It means, because up to now, I don't know the proper statement that has come from the UN that is actually talking against this. I am not so aware. And what does that tell the citizens of this world about their faith and belief in the UN systems? It tells a lot, because it will show that UN is also being under the capture of these big brothers. But then finally, if you want to say it is democracy, because America rides on pushing the agenda of democracy in the world.
But
wait, I finish.
Trump didn't say he was pushing democracy.
No, I'm saying generally Americans have painted a picture that they are the father of democracy, so in every part of the world they want democracy to take the lead. But now the question would be, as I finish, the majority, because democracy is about majority deciding this is the way we are going. The majority of the League of Nations have seen what happened in Israel, and they didn't like it, except a few countries. But why has Netanyahu not been taken by Americans? Okay. Because if democracy is the way to go, then many countries in this world today are not supporting the position Israel took against Hamas. Okay. But why did America not go there?
Nyamori, as you give your take, Africans have instances where they've had statements from President Trump about the killing of Christians in Nigeria, which he spoke very loudly about, and he even sent some troops there, about what is happening with the racial relations in South Africa and what kind of action he would take. And probably that's where Africans are coming from. Most African states, that this guy has a lot of very strong opinions on some of our happenings in Africa. He could decide to take action.
You know, Trump is trying to create himself into the monolith in the world. And you know, in my view, unfortunately, Trump is the typical American attitude towards the world, where they think that they are the best thing that ever happened, and that the whole world owes them, and they don't give a damn about what you think, and that the American, you know, interest is what matters. Okay, and others have, you know, covered it in courtesy and so on, but Trump is a typical American attitude. Unfortunately, I am a student of an emerging legal philosophy, which is called the third world approach to international law. And then our own professor, Makau Mutua, has written papers and books about it. We have other Kenyan scholars and other African scholars. And now, you know, this is the time for the leadership of the African Union and the leadership of various countries in Africa and Kenyan scholars and African scholars and stakeholders to, you know, start discussing our place in the international law. Because as my, you know, fellow panelists have mentioned, the behavior of Trump makes nonsense of the coming together of, you know, states through the UN Security Council, and other, forums, international forums. And the third world probably needs to converge and know that what Trump is doing, for lack of a better word, is an attack on sovereignty of independent states without any justification. Okay, the UN have principles like the right to protect, which are very defined principles that would allow another state to come into, a sovereign state to protect human rights. But just moving in for something that has not been discussed in international forums and the kidnapping a president and taking to a country is a danger to the entire world. The other thing is it speaks of double standards, that the rich and powerful countries think that they can provide rules. They set rules and they execute those rules, and they don't themselves live by those rules. America is this country that has even refused to date to sign the ICC code, and that they have gone around the world, killed, maimed, and no one can hold them to account. And so, in my view, it is it is important that under the principles of self-determination, countries, especially emerging third world economies, should realize that their strength lies in them coming together, in their numbers, in the ability of them to look inwards, to protect themselves. Otherwise, I disagree on many things with Museveni, but I respect him as an intellectual. And at some point, he was talking to a team of young Africans in South Africa, and he told them that Africans should blame themselves for being weak. They should blame themselves for being attacked because they have refused to get together, to bring their militaries together, so that the rest of the world...
But how can they do it? How do they do it?
I only have 2 minutes. If you can express it, whatever you need in a minute, that's okay.
Yes. Now, there are 4 things that happened which, to me, they're not coincidental. I mean, it's not about coincidence. Look, number 1, we have the Zionist Netanyahu coming out and saying that we recognize Somaliland. And when you go back and look at the documentation, Somaliland is supposed to be, in the Zionist scheme of things, the place to resettle the Palestinians that are being chased out. Now, this Zionist Netanyahu goes to the United Nations and says that we have this map of the larger Israel. And the larger Israel has to be taken over. I mean, it means that the Middle East will be taken over by Israel, meaning that they have to displace all those Palestinians in Gaza, meaning that they have to find a place for them, which is why Somaliland then was being recognized by Israel. And immediately that happened, there was this furore, there was this outcry that came, all over the world. And so you needed to ease that tension, Venezuela. Second, you have, at the domestic level, Trump being accosted by these, hey, we want all these Epstein files. We need to see the documentation about Epstein. And you all people are pedophilias. You all people are feeding on adrenochrome. You take all these children and this is what you do. And then, of course, that will topple the government. That's Venezuela. The third issue is that you need to dismantle the United Nations. None other than your own president, who Meshach is praising here, went to the United States. We need a new paradigm of the United Nations. We need to change the international economic system. And he's a mouthpiece. He's a puppet being given by Venezuela. So you need to change that. The fourth and last thing. In order then to have this international change of the existing status quo, you have a Trump who is feeding into the Club of Rome the ideas from the World Economic Forum. And for them, without any participation of the people of Africa, who Joshua is speaking about, lambasting the African, siding with Museveni, says that, you Africans are not getting together. What can the African do when the African Union is actually being funded by them? Now, that is a Club of Rome, the World Economic Forum, the Bilderbergers, and everybody else, they want to have the 10 world regions. So Trump wakes up and says that we need to annex Canada as a 51st state, together with Greenland. Now, when you look at the map offered in 1973 by the Club of Rome, that happens to feed in, then to ease up Venezuela. So Venezuela was, as it were, an escape route in order to divert the world attention from all those funds.
All right.
And in the meanwhile, the Zionists are going on with their Somaliland issue, and the issue went to the United Nations. As I close, what has happened in the United Nations? That's what Meshach asked.
Okay.
Who has moved the United Nations? So let's forget about the hypocrisy. And then we have a dictatorship that is up there deciding our own fate. We have just a pretense of an African Union. I agree with Joshua to that extent, but we have ourselves to blame.
And our time is up, unfortunately. And I just make a mental note that to the producer that we'll need to make time for this discussion. I think there's so much more that can be said about what's happening globally, especially with the latest happenings. America invading Venezuela and kidnapping its president and first lady and trying them under New York jurisdiction. Well,